What if the most important day of your life, the day you bring your child into the world, was the exact moment you discovered your entire marriage was a lie? For Isadora Vance Blackwood, the sterile white walls of a Lenox Hill Hospital birthing suite became a prison of betrayal. While she endured the agony of labor, her billionaire husband, Damien Blackwood, wasn't on an urgent business trip. He was sunning himself on a private island with his mistress. But this isn't just a story of infidelity. It's a story of how a woman pushed to the absolute limit orchestrated a response so calculated and devastating that it didn't just end a marriage, it threatened to bring an entire empire to its knees. The pain came in waves, a relentless tide pulling Isadora Vance Blackwood further and further from the shores of her manicured reality. Each contraction was a brutal clenching, a vice grip around her abdomen that stole her breath and blurred the edges of the ridiculously opulent birthing suite at Lenox Hill Hospital. It was a room designed to look less like a hospital and more like a suite at the Carlisle Hotel, with its muted grey walls abstract art and a vase of white peonies that were already beginning to wilt their soft heads, bowing in silent sympathy. The room was empty, save for the rhythmic electronic beep of the fetal heart monitor. A lonely metronomic heartbeat in a cavern of silence. Her mother was flying in from London, her flight delayed by thunderstorms. Her sister was stuck in traffic on the I-495, a hopeless endeavor on a Monday afternoon. And her husband, Damien Blackwood, was in Singapore. Or so she thought. Just breathe through it. Mrs. Blackwood, the nurse, a kind woman named Maria, with tired eyes, had said an hour ago. Your husband will be here before you know it. He'll be on the first jet back. Isadora had nodded, clinging to that promise like a rosary. Damien was decisive. Damien was a problem solver, a multi-billionaire who treated global logistics like a personal game of chess. When he'd called her that morning, his voice crackling with static from halfway around the world, he'd sounded genuinely distressed. "Ellie, my love." "I'm so sorry," he'd said, the practiced sincerity in his tone, a balm on her frayed nerves. "The Sovereign Wealth Fund is moving up the timeline on the Helios acquisition. It's a complete fire drill. I have to be in the room. But I promise you the moment I can, I'm on the G650 and I'm flying straight to you. Don't you dare have this baby without me." She had laughed then, a weak, breathless sound. "I'll try to tell him to wait, but he seems to have his own schedule. He's a Blackwood darling. We don't wait for anyone." The memory, only 10 hours old now, felt like a relic from another lifetime. The pain was sharpening, focusing into a single blinding point of agony. She squeezed the cool metal of the bed rail, her knuckles white. Where was he? Singapore was a 16-hour flight. Even if he'd left the second he hung up, he'd still be hours away. The thought sent a fresh spike of panic, more piercing than the contraction through her heart. She was going to do this alone. She fumbled for her phone on the bedside table, her fingers trembling. Her thumb hovered over his contact photo, Damien tanned and impossibly handsome, smiling at her from the deck of their yacht in Portofino last summer. A perfect smile, a perfect life. Before she could press the call button, a notification banner unfurled at the top of her screen. It was from page 6, a gossip alert she'd forgotten to disable. Her finger slipped and the link opened. The world stopped. The beeping of the monitor faded into a distant hum. The pain in her belly was eclipsed by a cataclysmic shattering in her chest. It wasn't a picture of Damien in a sterile Singapore boardroom. It was Damien on a beach of impossible white mahand, lapped by water of an unreal turquoise. He was laughing, his head thrown back, sunlight glinting off the Patek Philippe watch she'd bought him for their 3rd anniversary. His arm was wrapped tightly around a woman who was most definitely not Isadora. Sable Dubois, a C-list model turned influencer with a surgically perfected face and a reputation for attaching herself to the highest bidder. She was wearing a barely there bikini, her bronzed body pressed against Damien's. In his other hand, he held a bottle of champagne, the condensation trickling down the dark green glass. The caption, dripping with snark, read, "While heiress wife Isadora gets ready to pop in, NYC tech titan Damien Blackwood closes a different kind of deal in the Maldives with model Sable Dubois. Sources say it's a working vacation. Sure looks like hard work to us. The Maldives, not Singapore." The lie was so blatant, so audacious, it was almost brilliant. He hadn't even bothered to construct a plausible cover story. He had simply counted on her being too pregnant, too trusting, too insulated within their gilded cage to ever find out. He had underestimated her. Everyone always underestimated her. Another contraction ripped through her, more savage than any before it. She cried out a raw, wounded sound that was half physical pain, half existential agony. The phone slipped from her grasp and clattered to the polished floor. The image of Damien and Sable smiling under the Maldivian sun was the last thing she saw, before her world dissolved into a white-hot supernova of pain and betrayal. A nurse rushed in. "Mrs. Blackwood, Isadora." "Is it time?" Isadora stared straight ahead, her eyes fixed on the wilting peonies. The soft, delicate woman who had checked into this suite that morning was gone. In her place, something new was being forged in the crucible of this ultimate betrayal. A core of steel was hardening around her heart. "Yes," Isadora said, her voice eerily calm. A quiet prelude to a storm. "It's time." She took a deep, shuddering breath. He wasn't just going to miss the birth of his son. He was going to miss the birth of the woman who would dismantle his world. Piece by gilded piece. The hours that followed were a surreal blur, a waking nightmare painted in strokes of clinical white and blood-red agony. Isadora's world shrank to the 4 walls of the delivery room. The kindly face of Maria the nurse, the stern but competent features of Dr. Anya Sharma, the relentless, rhythmic wave of contractions. These were the new anchors of her reality. The old ones had been vaporized by a single paparazzi photograph. As the Pitokin drip fed into her vein, intensifying the labor her body had tried to start on its own, her mind became a battleground. Every surge of pain was intertwined with a flash of memory, a ghost of the life she thought she had. A contraction, a wave of fire cresting, and she saw Damien on one knee on the rain-slicked cobblestones of a private courtyard in Paris, the diamond on the ring in the velvet box outshining the streetlights. He had quoted poetry, actual poetry, and she, a former art historian who had given up a promising career at the Met for him, had melted. "I will always protect you, Ellie," he had vowed. "You and our future family. You'll never have to worry about a single thing." "Push, Isadora. Push. You're doing wonderfully." Dr. Sharma's voice cut through the haze. Isadora bore down a guttural scream tearing from her throat. It wasn't just the pain of childbirth. It was the pain of 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000,000 casual deceptions she now saw with horrifying clarity. The late nights at the office, the last-minute trips to Hong Kong. The burner phone he claimed was for ultra-secure business that he guarded so jealously. It was all there, a tapestry of deceit she had been too blind, too comfortable, too in love to see. Another contraction. She was on the floor of what would be the nursery in their sprawling Fifth Avenue triplex, surrounded by paint swatches and fabric samples. Damien had walked in, kicked off his $1,000 loafers, and pulled her into his lap amidst the chaos. Grey clouds or soft linen for the walls, she had asked, holding up 2 chips. He had kissed her temple. "Whatever makes you happy, my love. Just build us a perfect nest. You're so good at that. You make everything beautiful." He had made her feel like the architect of their happiness, when all along she was just the unpaid, uncredited interior decorator of a beautiful lie. I can see the head. One more big push. "Isadora, give me everything you've got." She summoned a strength she didn't know she possessed. It came from a deep, primal well of fury that was now churning within her. The fury of a woman scorned, yes, but more than that. The fury of a woman who had been made a fool of. The fury of a mother whose child was being born into a foundation of lies. This final push wasn't for Damien. It wasn't for their broken marriage. It was for her, and for the tiny, innocent life about to enter this complicated, treacherous world. With a final shattering cry, the pressure released. It was followed by the most beautiful sound Isadora had ever heard, the strong, indignant wail of a newborn baby. "It's a boy," Isadora Dr. Sharma announced. Her voice filled with warmth as she laid the squirming, vernix-coated infant on Isadora's chest. "He's perfect. Absolutely perfect." Isadora stared down at the tiny, wrinkled face of her son. His eyes were squeezed shut. His mouth was open in a cry of protest at his rude eviction from the only home he'd ever known. He had a full head of dark hair, just like Damien's. For a fleeting second, a wave of grief washed over her so potent it nearly choked her. This was the moment they were supposed to share. This was the miracle that was supposed to solidify their family. But as she looked at her son, at his tiny, grasping fingers that curled instinctively around her own, the grief was burned away by a ferocious, protective fire. This little boy, her little boy, deserved more than a father who celebrated his impending birth with a mistress. He deserved more than a life built on a bedrock of deception. He deserved a fortress, and if his father wouldn't provide it, she would build it herself, out of the rubble of her old life. Later, after she had been moved back to the quiet opulence of the recovery suite, her mother, Beatrice Vance, finally arrived. She was a whirlwind of Chanel tweed and anxious energy, her perfectly coiffed silver hair slightly askew from her frantic journey. "Oh, my darling girl," she breathed, rushing to the bedside and enveloping Isadora in a cloud of expensive perfume. She looked at her grandson, now cleaned and swaddled in a bassinet beside the bed. "Oh, he's a Vance through and through. Look at that determined chin." Isadora gave her mother a weak, watery smile. Beatrice's gaze then fell upon her daughter's face, and her own smile faltered. A mother always knows. She saw the hollows under Isadora's eyes, the bruised purple hue that spoke of more than just a difficult labor. She saw the absence of joy. "Where is he, Isadora?" Beatrice asked, her voice dropping to a steely whisper. "Where is that husband of yours?" Isadora didn't answer. She simply picked up her phone from where a nurse had retrieved it, unlocked it, and showed her mother the screen. Beatrice Vance, a woman who had weathered hostile corporate takeovers alongside her husband and stared down the most intimidating figures in New York. Society stared at the picture of Damien and Sable. The color drained from her face. Her lips thinned into a razor-sharp line. She placed the phone back on the nightstand, with a quiet, deliberate click that sounded like a gavel falling. She said nothing for a full minute, her gaze distant, calculating. Then she looked back at her daughter, her eyes no longer soft with sympathy, but glinting with the hard, brilliant light of strategy. "All right, Beatrice," said her voice devoid of all emotion, save for a chilling resolve. "First we get you and the baby home. Then you're going to call your father, and we are going to burn it all to the ground." 2 days later, Isadora left the hospital. She did not go home to the Fifth Avenue triplex, a 3-story monument to her shattered dreams. The thought of sleeping in their bed, of walking through the nursery she had so lovingly designed for a life that would never exist, was physically repulsive. Instead, the chauffeured car, a discreet black Cadillac that was part of her father's private service, took her to a place she hadn't called home in over a decade, her parents' sprawling pre-war apartment on Park Avenue. It was a world away from the cold, modern aesthetic Damien favored. Here the walls were lined with books, the air smelled of old leather and lemon polish, and the furniture held the weight of generations. It was a sanctuary of quiet, old money power, a place where things were built to last. Her father, Arthur Vance, was waiting for them in his study. Arthur was the antithesis of Damien Blackwood. Where Damien was all charismatic flash and disruptive energy, Arthur was a creature of shadow and substance. A retired corporate litigator from the venerable firm of Sullivan and Cromwell, he had spent 40 years navigating the treacherous currents of high-stakes law. He was a man who understood that true power wasn't shouted from the rooftops. It was whispered in quiet, oak-paneled rooms. He had been semi-retired for 5 years, but his mind, Isadora knew, had lost none of its razor sharpness. He stood as she entered her son, now named Arthur Jr. A small act of rebellion she had claimed for herself, sleeping soundly in her arms. Her father didn't rush to her, didn't offer platitudes. He simply looked at her, his pale blue eyes taking in her exhaustion and the new hard set of her jaw. He then looked at the baby, and a flicker of something deeply tender crossed his features before being banked away. "Welcome home, Isadora," he said, his voice a calm baritone. He gestured to one of the worn leather armchairs opposite his mahogany desk. "Beatrice told me everything. Let's talk." For the next hour, with her mother guarding the door and her son sleeping peacefully in a bassinet her father had retrieved from the attic, Isadora laid out the story. She spoke with a detached clarity that surprised even herself. She recounted Damien's lies, the discovery, the lonely birth. She didn't cry. The time for tears was over. This was a war council. When she finished, Arthur leaned back in his chair, making a steeple with his long, elegant fingers. He was silent for a long time, the only sound in the room, the gentle ticking of a grandfather clock in the corner. "The prenuptial agreement is ironclad," he finally said, his voice thoughtful. "Damien's lawyers made sure of that. You'll get a one-time settlement of 20 million plus the deed to the Hamptons house and 5 million in a trust for the child. Generous by any standard, but it's a pittance compared to his actual worth. It's designed to let you live comfortably, but quietly. It's designed to make you go away." "I don't want to go away, Father," Isadora said, her voice low and intense. "I don't want his settlement. I don't want his house. I want to hurt him. I want him to feel even a fraction of the humiliation he's put me through. He built an empire on the idea that he's 10 steps ahead of everyone. He thinks I'm a decoration. I want to prove him wrong." A slow reptilian smile touched Arthur Vance's lips. It was a smile Isadora had seen him use only a few times in her life, usually right before he completely dismantled an opponent's case in court. "Good," he said. "That's the Vance blood talking. Anger is a potent fuel, but it's useless without a roadmap. We will not be emotional. We will be precise. We will be surgical." He swiveled in his chair and turned to a small, unassuming safe built into the wall behind a framed print of Dutch merchant ships. He spun the dial, opened it, and retrieved a single thick document bound in dark blue leather. He placed it on the desk between them. "Do you remember this?" he asked. Isadora leaned forward. The gold leaf lettering on the cover read, "The Blackwood Vance Foundation, Charter and Bylaws." She remembered it vaguely. It was a charitable foundation Damien had established 2 years ago, a vanity project designed to generate good press and provide hefty tax write-offs. He had insisted on making Isadora the chairperson and a primary signatory on all accounts. It was a classic Damien move, a grand gesture that gave her the illusion of power and responsibility while keeping her occupied and away from his actual business. He would occasionally tell her to sign a check for a gala sponsorship or a donation to a museum, and she had done so dutifully and without much thought. It was for Isadora said a hint of the old bitterness creeping in. "A way to keep me busy." Precisely, Arthur said, flipping the document open to a specific page marked with a tab. He saw it as a bauble, a shiny toy, to distract his pretty wife. But Damien, for all his genius in acquisitions, is arrogant. He's sloppy with details he considers beneath him. And he underestimated not only you, but me. "I reviewed this charter before you signed it." He slid the document across the desk. His finger rested on a single paragraph in a dense section titled Asset Management and Voting Rights. Isadora read it. Then she read it again, her heart beginning to pound a heavy, rhythmic drum against her ribs. The language was dense, legalistic, almost impenetrable. But the meaning, as her father began to explain it, was as clear and as devastating as a sniper's bullet. To fund the foundation, Damien hadn't just allocated cash. To avoid a massive capital gains tax event, he had transferred a significant non-controlling block of shares from one of his subsidiary companies into the foundation's holding account. The company was called Helios Innovations. Helios Isadora whispered the name, sending a jolt through her. "That's the company he's supposedly in Singapore for. The one with the Sovereign Wealth Fund." The very same Arthur confirmed, his eyes gleaming. "It's his crown jewel, a next-generation satellite communications company that Blackwood Holdings is about to take private, a multi-billion-dollar deal. The foundation holds a 7% stake, not enough to control the company, of course. But," he let the word hang in the air. But what Isadora pressed, leaning forward so intensely, she could feel the pull of her stitches. But her father continued, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "According to this clause, which I may have helped his junior lawyers draft, over a very long lunch in the event of a takeover vote, the chairperson of the foundation, that would be you, my dear, has the right to exercise the voting rights of those shares in person at the final shareholders' meeting." It was positioned as a way to ensure the foundation's philanthropic interests were always represented. A feel-good clause. Damien signed it without a second thought. Isadora stared at him, the pieces clicking into place, the sheer beautiful audacity of the plan dawning on her. The final shareholders' meeting, she breathed, to approve the acquisition, is scheduled for Friday. "In 3 days," Arthur said. "Damien, I imagine we'll be flying back from his hard work in the Maldives, just in time for it expecting to be lauded as a hero." He will walk into that boardroom, expecting a unanimous vote, a rubber stamp on his biggest triumph to date. He paused, letting the full weight of his next words land. Instead, he's going to find you, sitting at the table. The next 72 hours were a masterclass in controlled chaos orchestrated from the quiet command center of Arthur Vance's study. The apartment transformed. The scent of lemon polish was replaced by the smell of ozone from overworked laptops and the bitter aroma of endless pots of coffee. Beatrice marshaled the household staff, ensuring a steady flow of food and drink, acting as a formidable gatekeeper, and most importantly, overseeing the care of baby Arthur, insulating him from the storm his mother was about to unleash. Isadora, fueled by a mixture of caffeine, adrenaline, and righteous fury, underwent a stunning transformation. The exhaustion and pallor of childbirth were burned away by a cold, sharp-edged focus. She devoured every document her father and his hand-picked team of legal sharks put in front of her. They weren't the swaggering, high-priced lawyers from Damien's world. They were older, quieter men and women who, like her father, had retired from the top of their fields, but still relished the intellectual combat of high-stakes corporate warfare. They convened not in a flashy boardroom, but around Arthur's heavy mahogany desk. There was Constance Wu, a forensic accountant who could make a balance sheet sing like a canary, and Ben Carter, a wiry, intense securities lawyer who knew SEC regulations the way a priest knew scripture. The play is audacious, but it's clean. Ben Carter confirmed on Wednesday afternoon, peering over his spectacles at the Helios Charter. The language is unambiguous. As chairperson of the Blackwood Vance Foundation, Isadora has the absolute right to be present and to vote the Foundation's 350,000 shares. Damien can't block her. He can't send a proxy. She is the proxy. And the timing is a gift from the heavens. Constance Wu added, tapping a perfectly manicured nail on a stack of financial printouts. This deal to take Helios private is leveraged to the absolute hilt. Damien's holding company is borrowing against the projected future value of the privatized entity. The linchpin of the entire deal is securing over 90% of shareholder approval to trigger a squeeze-out of any remaining minority shareholders. Anything less and the financing gets complicated. The interest rates could be renegotiated. The whole house of cards gets shaky. Isadora listened, absorbing every word. She was no longer just a grieving wife. She was a student of war. She learned about leveraged buyouts, shareholder resolutions, and poison pills. The world of finance, a world she had always found opaque and boring. A world Damien had deliberately excluded her from, was now revealing itself to be a battlefield. And she was about to march onto it. Meanwhile, Damien's communications were a study in oblivious arrogance. He had called once on Tuesday evening, his voice still thick with the languor of his vacation. "Ellie, my love. How are you feeling? I'm so sorry this thing is dragging on longer than I expected. The time difference is a killer. Did I miss anything?" The casualness of the question. Did I miss anything was like a splash of gasoline on the fire in her soul. She had steeled herself for this call, rehearsing her lines with her father. She kept her voice deliberately flat, tired. The baby came Damien, yesterday morning. There was a pause on the other end of the line. She could practically hear the gears turning in his head, the calculation of how to spin this, how to manage the situation. "Oh my God, darling. I'm on my way. I'm leaving now. I can't believe I missed it. I'm so sorry." Is he okay? Are you okay? A boy or a girl? A boy, she said the word, tasting like ash. We're fine. We're at my parents' place. Your parents? Why not at home? A flicker of annoyance in his voice. He liked to control the environment, their home. Her parents' territory was not his. It was just easier, she said, her voice betraying nothing. I was tired. Don't worry, Damien. Just focus on your deal. We'll be here when you get back. I'll be there for the meeting on Friday, I promise, he said, his relief palpable. He had bought her story. He thought her subdued tone was just postpartum exhaustion. He still saw her as the docile, accommodating wife. I'll come straight from the airport to see you and my son. I'll make this up to you, Ellie. I'll buy you a new diamond necklace. A big one. She had hung up the phone, her hand steady. A diamond necklace. He thought he could fix a betrayal of this magnitude with a piece of jewelry. The insult was so profound, it was almost laughable. On Thursday, the day before the meeting, Arthur made a single crucial phone call. He dialed a number from memory, a contact from his long and storied past. He spoke for less than 5 minutes, his language cryptic and concise. He mentioned no names, only a company, a shareholder meeting, and a potential interesting development. Who was that? Isadora asked when he hung up. An old friend, Arthur said with a faint smile. He's now a senior editor at the Wall Street Journal. I merely suggested it might be worth his while to have a reporter and a photographer positioned outside the Blackwood Holdings headquarters tomorrow morning. Just in case. That evening, Isadora did not sleep. She sat by the window of her childhood bedroom, looking out over the glittering lights of Park Avenue. In the bassinet beside her, baby Arthur slept, his chest rising and falling in a steady, peaceful rhythm. He was the calm at the eye of the hurricane she was about to become. She thought about the woman she had been just 1 week ago, worrying about paint colors and floral arrangements. She felt a strange pity for her innocence, for her naive belief in the fairy tale Damien had so carefully constructed. That woman was gone forever. Tomorrow, she would wear armor. Not of steel, but of Tom Ford. She would wield a weapon, not of iron, but of a single overlooked clause in a document. She was not the damsel in the tower. She was the dragon, and she was about to show Damien Blackwood what happens when you try to steal a dragon's treasure. Friday morning arrived with the kind of sharp, crystalline clarity that felt like a divine proclamation. The sky over Manhattan was a brilliant, achingly beautiful shade of blue, a perfect day for an execution. In the quiet of her childhood bedroom, Isadora stood before a full-length mirror, not recognizing the woman who stared back. This was a stranger forged in betrayal's crucible. The soft, flowing fabrics of her previous life had been banished, replaced by the severe architectural lines of a black Tom Ford pantsuit. It was armor. Each element of her appearance was a calculated act of war. Her hair, usually worn in a gentle, accommodating wave, was pulled back into a sleek, merciless chignon at the nape of her neck, exposing the determined line of her jaw. Her makeup was a mask of serene neutrality, applied with the precision of a surgeon designed to reveal nothing. The only piece of jewelry she wore was her simple gold wedding band, a final, exquisitely ironic twist of the knife before she pulled it out for good. She looked less like a new mother and more like a wartime consigliere about to sit down with a rival family. Before she left, she paused by the bassinet, where baby Arthur slept, his tiny chest rising and falling in the steady rhythm of innocence. She brushed a feather-light kiss on his forehead, a silent vow. This is for you. so you never have to live in a house built on lies. Her father was waiting for her in the hall. He didn't offer empty reassurances. He simply observed her transformation, a flicker of fierce pride in his pale blue eyes. He held out a slim black leather portfolio. "Everything you need is in here," he said, his voice a calm baritone. The Foundation Charter, a summary of the key clauses highlighted by Ben and Constance's analysis of the deal's financial vulnerabilities. But you won't need them. You know this case cold, Isadora. Just remember who you are. Not the woman he married. The woman you were born to be. What if he tries to stop me? Physically, she asked the question clinical, devoid of fear. He can't. Arthur said, a chilling finality in his tone. Security has been alerted by the board secretary of your attendance, as is your legal right. He will have no grounds to remove you. He will be trapped in that room with you. The only thing he can do is react, and knowing Damien, he will not react well. Let him. Let the world see the tyrant behind the Titan. As her chauffeured Cadillac slid to a silent stop outside the gleaming monolithic tower of Blackwood Holdings, she saw the first fruit of her father's phone call. A reporter she recognized from the Wall Street Journal and a photographer with a long-lensed camera were lingering near the entrance, their casual posture a perfect disguise for their predatory intent. A silent promise of the public humiliation to come. Walking through the lobby was like parting the Red Sea. The cavernous space, usually buzzing with the arrogant energy of Damien's empire, fell into a stunned, spreading silence. The familiar faces of his employees, people who had always greeted her with fawning, dismissive smiles at holiday parties, now stared with slack-jawed astonishment. Whispers erupted in her wake like sparks from a fire. She felt their eyes on her back, their phones being discreetly pulled from pockets. She ignored them all, her gaze fixed, her pace unwavering. She was a ghost walking into the heart of the machine, and the machine was beginning to short-circuit. She rode the express elevator to the 60th floor alone, the ascent swift and silent. It was the last moment of peace, a final breath before the plunge. Her heart was not fluttering with nerves, but beating with a cold, heavy, purposeful rhythm. A war drum. The boardroom was exactly as she remembered, a sterile, intimidating space designed to project power. A 20-foot-long slab of polished black granite dominated the room, reflecting the panoramic sweep of Central Park below, like a dark, still lake. Seated around the table were the board members, a collection of stony-faced men, and one woman, all titans of industry and finance, all loyal vassals to King Damien. They looked up as she entered, their polite, curated smiles, freezing and then crumbling like ancient frescoes. An audible intake of breath came from one of them. The corporate secretary, a mousy man named Henderson, dropped his pen. Isadora walked silently to her seat. There was a place setting for her, as required by corporate law, at the far end of the table, an island of solitude opposite Damien's empty throne at the head. A bottle of Voss water, a crisp notepad, a pen. Isadora Vance Blackwood, chairperson. The Blackwood Vance Foundation. The sight of her own name, so formally written, solidified her resolve. She calmly poured herself a glass of water, the sound of the liquid hitting the glass unnaturally loud in the absolute suffocating silence. The tension stretched for 5 excruciating minutes. Then the doors to the boardroom burst open, and the spell was shattered. Damien strode in a conquering hero returning from battle. He was tanned, rested, and radiating a blinding aura of confidence and power. He wore a suit so exquisitely tailored, it looked like it was spun from shadow and money. He was laughing, clapping his CFO, a perpetually nervous man named Marcus Thorne, on the back. A slam dunk. "Marcus, I'm telling you," his voice boomed across the room. "The financing is locked. The vote is a formality. And by lunchtime, Helios is ours. We'll drink champagne from the skull of whichever competitor thought they could stand in our way." He reached the head of the table, his brilliant, predatory smile sweeping across the assembled board. And then he saw her. It was a cinematic moment of collapse. The smile didn't just falter, it was annihilated. It was as if he'd been physically struck by an invisible force, the air punched from his lungs. The color drained from his expensive tan, leaving a sickly, grayish pallor. His eyes, which had been sparkling with triumph, widened in sheer, unadulterated shock. The shock curdled in a nanosecond into a look of such disbelief, such profound fury, that Isadora felt a primal flicker of the old fear. It was extinguished instantly by the cold, hard diamond of her resolve. "Isadora," he hissed. The name was a venomous dart shot across the granite expanse, intended to wound, to put her back in her place. "What in the hell are you doing here?" Isadora met his murderous gaze without flinching. She let the silence hang for a beat, forcing every person in the room to lean in. Her voice, when she spoke, was cool, clear, and carried to every corner of the silent room. "I'm here to represent the interests of the Foundation. Damien, as is my right according to the charter you signed, I'm here to vote our shares." The board members exchanged panicked, bewildered glances. Marcus Thorne looked like he was about to have an aneurysm. Damien took a half-step towards her down the length of the table, his hands clenched into white-knuckled fists. "This is a joke, a pathetic, hysterical joke. Security!" He bellowed, his voice cracking with rage. "Get her out of here. She's not well. She just had a baby." "I'm perfectly well." "Damien," Isadora said, her tone utterly reasonable. She did not raise her voice. She didn't have to. "And if you have security lay a hand on me, I imagine every news outlet in this city will have a field day with the headline, 'Billionaire Damien Blackwood forcibly ejects new mother and wife from boardroom to push through deal.' I believe your father's old friend from the Journal is already downstairs waiting for just such a photo opportunity." She gestured with her pen towards the window overlooking the city, a picture of unruffled calm. He froze, checkmated. His gaze darted from her face to the suddenly terrified faces of his board members, the walls of the trap he had built for himself closing in around him. He had nowhere to go. With a visible, shuddering effort, he reined in his volcanic fury. He walked slowly, deliberately to his chair and sat down, his movements stiff with contained violence. "Fine," he spat the word, dripping with contempt. "Fine. Let's get on with it. Let's have the vote." "This changes nothing." The corporate secretary, his hands trembling, began the formal proceedings. He called for the vote on Resolution 1, the approval of the acquisition of Helios Innovations by Blackwood Holdings. One by one, the board members voted their voices a chorus of strained loyalty. Aye, aye, aye. Each aye was a hammer blow, and with each one Damien's confidence seemed to reinflate slightly, a smug, contemptuous smirk returning to his lips. He thought she was bluffing. He thought this was a childish tantrum. Finally, it was her turn. The secretary cleared his throat, his eyes darting towards Damien, the Blackwood Vance Foundation holding 350,000 shares. Isadora leaned forward, slightly, her posture commanding the room. Her voice rang with the clarity of a bell in a crypt. The Blackwood Vance Foundation votes. No. A collective gasp sucked the air from the room. Damien's smirk vanished, replaced by a look of stunned feral rage. He looked as though he was going to launch himself across the table. His CFO, Marcus, his face ashen, did the quick math. The vote only stands at 88% in favor, he stammered. Damien, we don't have the 90% threshold for the squeeze-out. The financing terms, they're contingent. Shut up, Marcus! Damien roared, slamming his fist on the granite table so hard the water glasses jumped and rattled. He fixed his murderous glare on Isadora. What do you want? He snarled, dropping all pretense. Is this about money? You want a bigger settlement? Is that what this pathetic stunt is about? You've made your point. Name your price. Isadora rose from her chair, her movements fluid and graceful. She looked not at Damien, but at the entire board, at the powerful men who had enabled him for years. This isn't about money, she said, her voice resonating with a power they had never heard from her. The power of absolute conviction. It's about principle. This deal, as it stands, is leveraged with a reckless disregard for risk that is not in the best interest of the foundation I represent. My vote stands. She then turned her gaze like a laser to her husband. For the first time, she allowed a flicker of the profound pain he had caused her to show in her eyes, turning it into a weapon of exquisite cruelty. My lawyers will be in touch with yours on Monday morning to discuss the terms of our divorce, she said, her voice dropping to a near whisper that was somehow more devastating than a shout. I trust you had a pleasant trip to the Maldives. I hear the weather was lovely this time of year. Without another word, she picked up her leather portfolio. She turned her back on the wreckage of her husband's face, on the chaos and ruin she had single-handedly unleashed, and walked out of the boardroom. Her heels clicked a steady, victorious rhythm on the marble floor, the only sound in a world she had just broken. The fallout was not a slow burn. It was a detonation. Isadora felt the shockwave before she even reached the elevator. It was in the sudden, frantic vibration of phones from the pockets of staffers in the hall, the way their eyes widened at their screens, before flicking to her with a new kind of awe, a fearful respect. The air itself seemed to crackle with the digital wildfire she had ignited. As she stepped into the elevator, the heavy doors closing on the chaos, she saw her reflection in the polished steel. The woman staring back was calm, her face a serene mask. But inside her heart was hammering a triumphant, terrifying rhythm. She had not just lit the match. She had become the inferno. By the time her car merged into the midday traffic on Park Avenue, the story was all ready gospel. Her father's tip to the Wall Street Journal had been more than a suggestion. It was a masterfully aimed torpedo. The image that led every financial news site was a stark, brutal piece of narrative warfare. There she was emerging from the monolithic tower, poised and unreadable in her black power suit, a figure of icy control, and perfectly framed behind her, captured through the revolving glass doors like a caged animal, was the blurred, apoplectic figure of Damien Blackwood. His face was a contorted mask of pure, impotent rage, his hand gripping his CFO's arm, not for support, but to keep himself from lunging forward. The headline was a stiletto to the heart of his reputation, devastatingly simple. Blackwood's Helios deal blocked by his wife. The story was too perfect to be contained by the financial press. It bled into the gossip columns, the morning talk shows, and the cable news networks, becoming an instant cultural phenomenon. The narrative was irresistible, the billionaire's beautiful, docile wife left alone to give birth, while her husband vacationed with his mistress, returning not as a weeping victim, but as a corporate Boudica, wielding his own arrogance as a weapon against him. Sable Dubois was collateral damage her name, and surgically perfected face forever linked to the scandal. Her sponsors dropped her overnight, her social media was flooded with derision, and she became a permanent punchline, the cheap catalyst for a cataclysm she couldn't possibly comprehend. Damien's empire, a monolith built on the carefully cultivated myth of his infallible foresight and ruthless control, began to show deep structural cracks. The failed Helios deal was more than a financial setback that could be weathered. It was a public castration of his persona. His lenders, who had loaned him billions based on that very persona, grew palpably nervous. His shareholders, who had bought into the legend of the man who never lost, grew restless and angry. And the sharks in the water, the rival hedge fund managers and corporate raiders he had bested and humiliated over the years, began to circle their grins wide as they scented blood. The divorce proceedings were not a negotiation. They were an unconditional surrender. Damien's high-priced, aggressive lawyers entered the first meeting, expecting to bully and intimidate. They were met by the quiet, surgical precision of Arthur Vance and his team. Isadora sat at the head of the table, silent, a powerful, unnerving presence. She held the 7% stake in Helios, a loaded gun, pointed directly at Damien's next attempt to salvage the deal. With the full weight of public opinion as her shield, she didn't need to speak. Her team didn't ask for the Hamptons house or a one-time payout. They didn't want alimony. Mrs. Vance Blackwood does not require an allowance, Arthur stated coolly, looking down his nose at Damien's blustering legal counsel. She is here to claim the assets she has earned. The final settlement was a work of art, a document that would be studied in law schools for decades. Isadora agreed to relinquish her vote in Helios, allowing Damien to eventually salvage his deal, albeit at a much higher cost, and with his reputation in tatters. In exchange, she took a complete controlling interest in a portfolio of his other assets, the ones he'd acquired as pet projects, and largely ignored a boutique luxury hotel chain, a significant block of shares in a promising green energy startup, and a commercial real estate portfolio in downtown Manhattan. They were assets he had undervalued, considered secondary to the glitz of his tech ventures. But Isadora, guided by her father and her new team of hungry, brilliant advisors, saw their true potential. She wasn't just taking his money. She was taking the overlooked seeds in his empire, and was going to cultivate them into a forest he could only watch grow from a distance. The Blackwood Vance Foundation was her first order of business. She summarily dismissed the old board of Damien's cronies, and installed a new one composed of formidable women from law, finance, and activism. The Foundation's mission was rewritten. It was transformed into a powerhouse, singularly focused on providing grants for female entrepreneurs and funding legal aid for women fighting their way out of abusive or controlling situations. It was a quiet, pointed, and profoundly effective rebuke to Damien's entire worldview. 6 months later, Isadora sat not in a stuffy Park Avenue apartment, but in her own corner office overlooking the city. The space was sleek and modern, but infused with her warmth. Thriving white orchids had replaced the memory of wilting peonies. On the credenza behind her desk, the only art was a series of silver-framed photos of her son, a chubby, smiling baby Arthur, who was currently napping with his nanny in a private room connected to the office. She was no longer Mrs. Damien Blackwood, the socialite. She was Isadora Vance, the founder and CEO of Vance Sterling Holdings, a name she had chosen herself, combining her formidable heritage with her newfound strength. Her phone buzzed with a text from her father. It was a link to a Forbes article. The headline glowed on her screen: "The New Empress of New York." How Isadora Vance turned a public betrayal into a billion-dollar queendom. A genuine, radiant smile, the first of its kind, in a long time touched her lips and reached her eyes. She looked over at the photo of her son, his gummy grin, a beacon of pure joy. She had done more than just survive. She had done more than get revenge. She had built a fortress for him, an empire of her own making on her own terms. She had discovered that the gilded cage Damien had built for her was never meant to hold her. It was simply the chrysalis from which she was meant to emerge. And from its shattered golden pieces, she had finally learned how to fly. Damien Blackwood was still a billionaire, but he was a diminished thing, a ghost of his former glory. He became a cautionary tale whispered in boardrooms and at cocktail parties, a man who had won countless battles but had lost the one war that mattered. He had been defeated by the one person he had never, ever considered a worthy opponent. Forgetting the oldest rule in the book: never underestimate the woman you have wronged. For she may just take everything you hold dear and build something far more beautiful in its place. And that's how Isadora Vance flipped the script. It started with a shocking betrayal, but it ended with one of the most incredible stories of empowerment we've ever seen. She didn't just get even. She got everything. By refusing to be a victim, she transformed her deepest pain into her greatest weapon, proving that true power isn't about the money you have, but the strength you find when you have nothing left to lose. Damien Blackwood thought he was breaking a decorative doll, but he accidentally unleashed a queen. What did you think of Isadora's ultimate revenge? Was it a masterstroke of genius or a cold-hearted power play? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you love stories about shocking truths, incredible transformations, and karma being served on a silver platter, make sure to hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life dramas just like this one.